All right, everyone, we're going to get started now. Welcome. I'm Molly Robb. I'm the project coordinator for the California Evidence-Based Clearinghouse for Child Welfare, or CEBC for short. I'd like to thank you all for joining us and welcome you to the webinar. Thank you for answering the poll questions. This is helpful information for our presenters. We've muted your phones due to the high number of participants attending. So if you're experiencing any technical difficulties or have any urgent questions, please use the Q&A pod located on the right side of the screen, and we will do our best to assist you. We will also have a brief Q&A section halfway through the webinar. Please use the Q&A pod to send us your questions. Lastly, you will receive a link shortly after the conclusion of this webinar to complete a short and easy survey so we can continue to improve our webinars and make them as useful and beneficial as possible in the future. Now, a brief introduction of our presenters. Cambria Rose Walsh has worked for Chadwick Center for Children and Families at Rady Children's Hospital since 2001. She is currently the project manager of the California Evidence-Based Clearinghouse for Child Welfare, CEBC, overseeing the day-to-day operations of the project. Cambria has experience in working with counties and agencies on the implementation of safe care and trauma-focused cognitive behavioral therapy, or TFCBT. In addition, she has an extensive history working with families involved with the child welfare system. She has a background in mental health and has worked as a therapist for children who were impacted by abuse and their families. She developed a training program that focused on educating child welfare workers about domestic violence and its impact on families, and provided direct support to the workers during home visits. Rhonda Williams is a research associate with the Chadwick Center for Children and Families at Rady Children's Hospital, San Diego, and the Child and Adolescent Services Research Center, or CASRIC for short. She assists the CEBC research coordinator by providing research support such as performing literature reviews and summarizing relevant, published, peer-reviewed research articles. Rhonda has a Bachelor's of Arts degree in psychology and 2 Master's of Arts degrees, one in human behavior and the other in counseling. So without further ado, I will turn it over to Rhonda and Cambria.
Thank you very much. So we're very pleased to have everybody joining us here this morning for this webinar. We will be recording the webinar, so if you have others who are interested that weren't able to make it, please let them know it will be recorded and available on the website within the next few days. So as Molly said, I am the project manager for the California Evidence-Based Clearinghouse, and I wanted to briefly go through our agenda here today. So we're going to talk about beyond the ratings. What do these numbers mean? We're also going to talk a little about the child welfare system relevance level and what these particular levels really tell you. And we're going to spend a little bit of time at the end today talking about the CEBC in comparison to other clearinghouses and how to kind of look at all the information when there's programs that cross over between the CEBC and some of the other major clearinghouses. We also will be giving you a little sneak peek today and some information about some additional information that we'll be adding onto the website over the next year to help you in being able to look beyond the ratings and utilizing those child welfare system relevance levels to really make good, impactful decisions about which practices you select. So just to give you a brief overview of the CEBC, the CEBC is funded by the California Department of Social Services with guidance from our advisory committee, our implementation science panel, and our scientific panel. So we have these 3 very important panels that assist us in the work that we do. Our advisory committee is mainly made up of child welfare directors, as well as those who represent frontline workers in child welfare and community-based organizations that work with child welfare, as well as members from the California Department of Social Services. And they really help us in thinking through the content that goes on the website, picking the topics that we add to the website each year, and making it as user-friendly as we possibly can. Our implementation science panel we just formed in the last year, and they're really helping us look through the issues around implementation and how you best select and implement practices. And a lot of the work that we're doing with them will feed into the new piece of the website that I alluded to earlier. And our scientific panel has been with us since the beginning of this project, and they helped us in creating the rating scales that we'll be talking about today. They also help us identify topic experts, and they help us when we run into difficulties with rating specific programs. So the CEBC was launched back in 2006. It was actually launched almost exactly 8 years ago now. It was June of 2006 when we first went live. When we first went live with 2 topic areas and about 17 programs, and now 8 years later we have 40 topic areas on the CEBC website and over 300 programs. So the CEBC rating process, I wanted to go through very briefly with you kind of how this process works. Give you a little behind-the-scenes information on this as we move into talking about the rating scale and kind of moving beyond the numbers piece of this. So most programs that we add to the website are identified with the help of the topic experts. So for each of those 40 topics that we have on the CEBC website, we have a topic expert that we've identified, usually with help from our scientific panel. And the topic experts are people who are very familiar with the research in a given area. So for instance, in the area of domestic violence, we worked with Dr. Jeffrey Edelson, formerly of the University of Minnesota, currently now up at Berkeley, and he's a great example of a topic expert who's very knowledgeable in that particular field, in the field of domestic violence, but is not somebody who actually has developed a program himself in that area. So we try to avoid program developers being our topic experts and really focus on people who have more of a wide breadth of knowledge in that particular area. Literature reviews for each program are conducted by the CEBC staff, as well as we ask the programs for information on any research that we conducted. And the reason for this is we certainly want to hear from the programs what research that they are aware of that's out there, but we also want to do our own independent literature review and make sure that they're telling us about all the research that's out there and not holding back on any studies that they have concerns about how it might impact their rating. The programs are rated by the topic expert and by the CEBC staff, and we're going to talk a little bit more about how that rating process works in just a moment. All of the programs have a 60-day provisional rating, so this gives a chance for users to provide feedback or concerns that they may have about rating within the first 60 days that a program is posted up on the website. But the reality is, at any point, even if a program has been on the website for a year or several years, if there's feedback that people have about the program or there's new research that's come out on the program, we certainly encourage our users to alert us to that so that we can relook at the programs. We do literature reviews for each of the programs at least every 2 years to identify any new research. And at any time, the users or representatives of the program can actually submit new research to us, and we're able to look at that. In addition, there's an open window, and that window is open right now for programs, for new programs to submit that are in the existing topic areas, but weren't looked at when we first identified those topic areas. And there's information on the CEBC website in the frequently asked questions section on how to do this. We really have had to limit how many programs, new programs that we can add into the existing topic areas, just given our limited staff and the amount of requests that come in. So we've formulated this new process where we'll have an open window for a month each year where the programs are able to do that and submit their information to us. It does need to come from the program directly. So if our users are interested in seeing a program, they would need to contact the program itself and ask them to submit the information to us. The other piece that's important to know about the role of the raters is the raters also determine the outcomes. Outcomes related to safety, permanency, or well-being are reported in the research, and they report, they also do the child welfare relevance level, which we'll be giving you more information about shortly. So on this next slide, we talk about the evolution of the CEBC rating scale. And it's evolved quite a bit over time, which is very important, we believe, for our users to understand that we really have learned things over time, and as we've learned new pieces to this, the scale has had changes. All of the changes that we have made have been in conjunction with meetings with our scientific panel and getting input from them on the ideas for the changes and feedback as to how to make the scale as relevant as we possibly can to the work that we're doing. It's important to note that there is no universal scale for rating programs out there, so if you go on to different clearinghouses, you'll see very different rating systems, and we'll talk more about that in the latter part of this session when we compare the clearinghouses. There are people who have come to us and asked if they can base their scales off of our scale, and it's open for people to do that, and we do give them, our okay to do that and ask them to cite that, it's based off of our scale. The challenge with that is that they don't always stay up to date on the changes that are made to the scale, and so while it may originally have been based on our scale, it may not be based on the scale that exists today. And so it's important to realize that as well if you come across a situation where you see that somebody has modified or has based their scale off of the one from the CEBC. So in terms of the changes, on June 15, 2006, when the CEBC was first launched, it was launched with a 6-point scientific rating scale, and that lasted for about a year or so, and in 2007 we made our first major change to the rating scale, and this rating change had to do with the criteria to be rated a 2 on the rating scale. And what we changed it from, originally, on the original scale, we had at least 2 rigorized randomized controlled trials in highly controlled settings like a university laboratory, with a sustained effect of at least 1 year beyond the end of treatment, were the requirements to be rated a 2. What we quickly realized over that first year is that we weren't having any programs that were falling into that particular category, that it just was not common for programs to limit their RCTs to being conducted in highly controlled settings. So we made the decision in conjunction with our scientific panel to change that, and so the 2 became at least 1 rigorous RCT in usual care or practice settings, and in at least one of the RCTs there would be a sustained effect of at least 6 months beyond the end of treatment. So basically we took out the requirement to have the highly controlled setting, and we also decreased sustained effect. And the reason we decreased the sustained effect and the number of RCTs required for a 2 is because to be a 1 you have to have 2 RCTs, and so we wanted to have something that would naturally step down from a 1. So having at least 1 RCT, to be rated a 1 you have to have a 1-year sustained follow-up, and so to be a 2 we again stepped that down because you needed to have a 6-month follow-up. The next major change that occurred was in January of 2009, and this again had to do with the idea of stepping down. As I said, when we launched the website, we had a 6-point scale. In 2009, it was decided that while it was logical to have kind of a hierarchical numerical rating of programs that had research support, the same was not true for programs that lacked the adequate research evidence. And at that time, the programs that didn't have research evidence were rated a 4. And the numerical rating of a 4 thus implied that there was a relative level of evidence compared to those that were rated a 3 or a 5. So it was this whole idea of stepping down or moving up the scale. So we made the decision in 2009 that the programs that lacked the adequate research evidence would remain on the website but would no longer be rated a 4, and we would remove their numerical scientific rating, and the scale would be changed to a 5-point scale. So that's when we added the category that's known as the not able to be rated category, and shifted all the numbers after that down so that instead of having 6 rating categories, there were 5 rating categories and then this not able to be rated group. The most recent change that we made to the scientific rating scale was in March of 2012, and at this time we added a rating criteria for a 3. And part of the reason that we needed to add this at this time is because we had a lot more programs that were on the website, and as we were looking at research for programs, we were noticing that at times programs were comparing themselves to other existing programs, many of which were on the CEBC website and rated. And so we wanted to add something for programs rated a 3 to say that it had to be comparable to a practice rated 3 or higher on the CEBC or superior to an appropriate comparison practice. So this allowed programs that have research that are comparing them to a program that's rated a 1, a 2, or a 3 to meet the criteria for a 3 if they essentially show that they are just as effective as a program that is already rated a 1, 2, or a 3 on our website. The other modification that we made in March of 2012 was to our category, that our 5 category, which is our concerning or harmful practice. And we changed the 5 category from saying a reasonable theoretical, clinical, empirical, or legal basis to there is case data suggesting a risk of harm that was probably caused by the treatment and that the harm was severe and or frequent, and or there is a legal or empirical basis suggesting compared to its likely benefits, the practice constitutes a risk of harm to those receiving it. And the reason that we did that was because we were realizing that just having a reasonable clinical basis was something that was rather difficult for us to define, and we wanted to have a little bit more of a tightening of that definition. So we replaced the clinical and the theoretical basis piece with the case data, which would give us something more concrete to look at. At this point, that's the last change that we've made to the scientific rating scale, but I guarantee that it will not be the final change, that it will continue to evolve over time. And already, as we'll talk about a little bit later in this presentation, there's some material that we're planning to discuss with our scientific panel next year about some potential changes to the rating scale as well. So, again, seeing that there's been all these changes over time, it's important to realize that secondary sources don't always update the information, and so they may not reflect some of the ways the CEBC rating scale has been adopted or been adapted, and so it's important to realize that both for users who are going on and looking at rating scales that are used on other websites that are based off of the CEBC, as well as those agencies and organizations that have based their information off of the CEBC rating scale to know that it does change over time. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Rhonda to give you some more information about our rating scale.
Good morning, everyone. Now we're going to discuss the CEBC rating scale. We're working to find out as much as we possibly can about the programs out there because we at the CEBC want to always assist child welfare professionals and the public in making it so that the information and research on a program or intervention is easily accessible and easily understood. Each program we review is rated on a scale of 1 to 5, where we carefully review all peer-reviewed literature to determine the ratings. 1 stands for well-supported practice and 5 stands for concerning practice. As you can see by the diagram, moving between ratings is like moving up or down a step. In order to be a 1, the program must have 2 or more randomized controlled trials published in peer-reviewed literature, and one of those, we call them RCTs, must show the practice to have a sustained effect of at least a year post-treatment. In order to be a 2 on the CEBC rating scale, the program must have at least 1 RCT in a published peer-reviewed literature that has shown sustained effects for 6 months post-treatment. And in order to be a 3, the program must have 1 study utilizing some form of control and be in a published peer-reviewed literature. Now, having said this, 3 is the most varied level because you could have a program with multiple RCTs but not have sustained effects 6 months post-treatment, or you could have a program with 1 study that had a treatment and control group but has not been randomized. The level 4, this level encompasses programs that have not resulted in improved outcomes when compared to usual care. The evidence does not support the efficacy of the program. So if there were 5 RCTs, 3 or more of them did not show effect. 5 is where Cambria said earlier, these programs either have research that demonstrates harm to clients or there has been a legal or obvious result that indicates harm. And our last area is the not able to be rated. As you can see in the circle above the NR, they lack peer-reviewed research or comparison studies but are generally accepted in clinical practice as appropriate for use. We at the CEBC often get pushback from developers that it is very difficult to randomize in child welfare populations, but we always say there's no requirement to randomize to no treatment or a wait list. Developers can use treatment as usual, where they compare new parent programs to existing parent programs. Or they can randomize by office or region, where they can train half of the staff can be trained in a new model. They can develop the series for 6 months and then train the remaining staff. But we will also be discussing adding additional study designs in the rating scale in 2015. Now this slide shows how many programs we have rated a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and not able to be rated. We currently have 28 programs that are rated a 1 on our scale on our website. We also have 41 programs that are rated a 2. We have 99 programs that are rated a 3. Only one program is rated a 4 on our website. We have no programs at this time that are rated a 5, and the majority of our programs are rated not able to be rated, and that's 168 of them.
All right, so the first piece that we want to talk about here is the sustained effect for 1s and 2s. And so kind of looking beyond the numbers on the 1s and 2s, there's a couple of cautions that we want to offer people that we've learned in our work here over time. The first is you really want to be sure to consider the expected outcomes and whether those would still be relevant a year post-intervention. So a good example of this would be Shaken Baby programs. Shaken Baby programs are designed to be delivered to new parents and are focused on impacting behaviors that really occur in the first few months of life. So the rating of a 2 for these particular programs, and I believe all of our Shaken Baby programs are rated either a 2 or a 3. We don't have any that are rated a 1. The rating of a 2 for these particular programs actually, having that 6-month follow-up post-intervention is really providing safety during the most critical time for these infants, and not that we wouldn't want to see an intervention effect a year out, but having an intervention 6 months out is actually a very strong evidence of the effectiveness of these programs to do what they're intended to do. So it's important to consider, and that's just one example, what the population is and whether these outcomes are still relevant. If the children are aging out of the particular issues that might be going on, so a year later having those same types of outcomes may not be as critical in some cases, and so having a 2 with a 6-month follow-up may actually be the kind of evidence that you need in order to really feel that this is a solid program to use for that particular circumstance. The other thing that's important to remember is that it takes time to study, to conduct the studies, and to publish on the follow-up studies. So to get a study that has a 1-year follow-up, means that you have to have conducted the entire study. Then you have to continue a year after the intervention, and if the intervention, in some cases, the interventions may last a year themselves, so then you're adding another year post the intervention, so that's 2 years, and then the time that it may actually take to write up the results and publish, could easily be another year or longer. And so it's important to realize that it takes time for a program to be able to be rated a 1. And it takes time for programs to be able to be rated a 2. So you need to also consider that as you're looking at the programs that are on the website, is that some of the programs that are on there very well may someday be able to be rated a 1 or 2. And we do, as I mentioned before, relook at the research that's out there every 2 years and ask programs to let us know when there's updates. And that, a big reason for that is because we know that research is ongoing and there is new information that's coming out about the programs.
Okay. Now, what we are going to review now are the examples of programs that have been rated a 3 on the CEBC website. As we saw earlier on the earlier chart, there are 99 programs rated a 3. Both of the programs on the screen are examples of programs that have been rated a 3 in the topic area of family stabilization. One is an example of a 3 with RCT but no follow-up, and the other program was rated a 3 because there was no randomization of the participants. Here are examples of programs that have not been able to be rated. There are 168 programs that were not able to be rated, and there are 5 topic areas where every program in that specific topic area was not able to be rated. These areas are anger management, commercial sexual exploitation of children and adolescents, permanency enhancement interventions for adolescents, supervised visitation, and youth transitioning into adulthood. On the left side of the slide is an example of a program in the higher level placement topic area that was not able to be rated because there is no research or the research has not been published in a peer-reviewed journal. And on the right side of the slide is a program that was not able to be rated because it did not have a comparison group, so it didn't meet the criteria to be rated a 3. Now, both of these, as I stated earlier, are in the higher level placement topic area. In summary, I just wanted to say that not all the programs rated a 3 are the same. There's a lot of variability on how much and what type of research has occurred. You should always look at the relevant research section. Also, if there are RCTs without follow-up, you can ask a program representative if there is research underway to look at the follow-up. Additionally, not all programs that are not able to be rated are the same. Some do have research. They just don't reach criteria to be rated a 3. We will talk about other things to consider later on in the presentation.
So at this point, we're going to open it up if there's any questions or clarification that people would like before we move on. You can write into your Q&A pod any questions that you have, and that will allow the presenters to see them. You have all been muted, so you're not able to ask your questions verbally. All right, so it looks like we have one question about when does a program receive and not able to be rated. So a program, basically what we've done with the CEBC is that we don't exclude programs if they don't have any research. So if our topic expert identifies a program in a new topic area that they think is a very relevant program for us to look at and is well known out in the community, is being commonly used and marketed, and they say, you really should go ahead and take a look at this program, although it may not have any research, we do go ahead and look at those programs because we want to have truth in advertising. And in those cases, when there isn't any published peer-reviewed literature and they don't meet the criteria for anything else on the rating scale, they can't be rated a 1 through a 5, then we make sure that we put them, we continue to look at them, that they will become a not able to be rated program. One important thing to know with all programs that are on the website is they do need to have a manual and they do need to have some sort of training that allows them to be replicable. And if they don't meet that criteria, then we are not able to look at them on the website. There's another question about, is there a list of topic experts posted on your website? There is. If you go into the About Us section on the website, underneath there's a tab that allows you to see the topic experts, and they are listed, their name and what topic they were the expert for, what year they were our topic expert, and then there's usually a link to their faculty page if they are a professor or researcher, or whatever web page makes the most sense for them, that then has some contact information on there for them. So we, again, are very transparent with who our topic experts have been over the years. So there's another question. For those programs that lack an evaluation or research component, how are they supported in building research capacity if this is a gap for them? So that is a wonderful question. At this point, the CEBC does not provide any formal support to organizations on working on research, although we do answer questions that come in to us and do give kind of informal guidance about the importance of looking for somebody in your community that can help in working on that. But that's not an area that we are able to assist programs with. They really have to go out and look and see what resources are available, and it differs depending on what area of the country you're in, what type of program it is, and all of those types of issues. But we certainly do encourage programs, and although we don't have any formal information to tell us this, we do get a sense that programs that are up on our website that are not able to be rated or rated a 3, or even rated a 2, oftentimes are motivated to want to continue to conduct research and try to move up in the ratings, and more importantly, show that they have research evidence for their program. Why are there categories for a 4 and 5 if not able to be rated can be research that did not meet the threshold for a 3? So the 4 category we created specifically because we wanted to have a category to show if a program really wasn't showing that it's effective. So it is able to be rated because there are research studies that are out there, and there have to be 2 or more research studies in order for it to be rated a 4 that show that it doesn't have an effect and that the program is not having an effect on the outcomes that it was intended to have an impact on. And the 5 category we created, although we don't have any programs that have met that criteria, because we wanted to have a place if we were to run across a program that was indicating that it was concerning, that it was showing harm. So we don't expect to use those categories very frequently, but we did want to have a place to very clearly identify either programs that weren't showing an effect or programs that were harmful. Last question here, do you think it's helpful to have an NR rating? Would that include new programs which are still being developed and tested, which might be good, or those where there is no research being done? These are different situations. That is an excellent question. We included the not able to be rated, as I mentioned before, because sometimes these are very commonly known programs. And anytime the program is not able to be rated, we would hope for our users that that would be kind of a flag, if you were, to think about questions that you would want to ask that particular program, one of which may be, is there research that's going on at this time, and what's the timeline for publishing on that particular research? Because I think that tells you a lot. If a program is not able to be rated, but they're in the process of doing research and planning to publish that research, then it gives you some sense they are really taking that seriously and they want to look at the research evidence for their program. If they are still being developed and tested, the question about whether they're good or not, we simply don't know. There could be programs that are in that not able to be rated category that are excellent programs that do have a very strong impact on outcomes. But if the research hasn't been done, there's simply no way for us to tell that. And we do rely on the published peer-reviewed literature because of the amount of programs that we look at. Again, we don't have the staffing to be able to do in-depth analysis and systematic reviews. And so we really have to rely on the standards of the peer-reviewed published research to tell us that those studies have been conducted in a way that meets kind of a threshold for us. All right, so at this point in time, that looks like the questions that we have, and we're going to move on to the next piece of our presentation. So we want to talk a little bit about the evolution of the child welfare system relevance levels. Again, this has changed over time. When the website was launched in 2006, it was actually called the Relevance to Child Welfare Rating, and it was only based on research. So to have a child welfare rating, you had to also have a scientific rating. If you were not able to be rated on the scientific rating scale, then you were not able to be rated on the Relevance to Child Welfare rating. In the spring of 2012, users, and I will say specifically our advisory committee among other users, really asked for us to expand this to programs that were not able to be rated. And so we looked into this. We talked with our scientific panel about kind of how we would do this and moving it from being a rating to what we decided to call a level. So no longer having it be relying on only the research allowed us to make the decision that we did not want to call it a rating. We wanted to call it a level instead. And part of the reason was because there wasn't any research to base it on. The other part of the reason that we changed it from a rating to a level is because we didn't want programs to be able to market themselves as being rated on the CEBC using the child welfare relevance instead of using their scientific rating, because they're very different items to consider. The other thing that we changed in 2012 was we changed the name. It used to be just the child welfare rating, and we wanted to change it to the child welfare system because we wanted to clarify that it was the formal child welfare system that we were looking at the relevance to, not the child welfare in a more general sense.
Now we're going to talk a little bit about the child welfare system relevance level in more detail. When the raters look at the child welfare system relevance level, they look at the research area and the brief description of population, for example, the socioeconomic status of the population, the educational level, and ethnicity of the population, to see if there are any similarities with individuals in the specified programs. The categories are high, medium, and low. Programs that fit the high category are often used with children and families currently involved with the child welfare system. Programs that fit the medium category are children and families that may or may not be involved with the child welfare system, but still meet many of the characteristics of participants currently involved in the child welfare system. Low programs that fit the low category are children and families that are not involved with the child welfare system and have no similarities with participants involved in child welfare system. Although there may be variability between the raters in the final analysis, there is one rater that will review all of the raters' comments and concerns and in a thoughtful process come to a consensus on the determination for the child welfare system's relevance level. Here are examples of programs that have been determined to be high and medium on the child welfare relevance systems level. Both are in the topic area of sexual behavior problems in children. TFCBT is used in individual treatment settings where cognitive behavioral treatment programs for school age is used in a group setting. So you would not want to use TFCBT in a group setting simply because it is determined to be high on the child welfare relevance level, where it is meant to be used in an individual setting. You have to make sure the program fits the population that is being treated.
All right, so we're going to pause again here to see if there's any questions or clarification on the child welfare system relevance level, or any other additional questions on the scientific rating piece that we discussed before we move on. All right, so we have one question here. Do you have evidence that the CEBC influences practice? Again, that's a really excellent question. We do not have direct evidence. We've not run any research studies to specifically look at that. We do have anecdotal evidence, that we see it influencing practice. But that's something that, we really are continuing to look at. How can we evaluate that? And we're actually currently looking at partnering with an outside group to help us in kind of evaluating that and look at what impact does the CEBC have on selection process that's made by child welfare in terms of what practices they have in their community, as well as making choices on practices for specific client use, and on how much it impacts the research being done on programs, because they may be influenced on the fact that they want to stand out on the CEBC at a higher rating level than they currently are. So we don't have any information on that currently, but we hope to, in the next year, as I said, to be involved in some more evaluation around that particular issue. All right, it looks like that's the only question that we have there for now, so we're going to move on to talk a little bit about the clearinghouses, and we'll offer some time to ask questions at the end of the presentation again. So there are several clearinghouses besides the CEBC that we know are commonly used to look at practices relevant for child welfare. And so what we decided to do for this presentation was to kind of take a look at a couple of the major players in that, to talk a little bit about how they do things similarly and how they do things differently from the CEBC. We are certainly not saying that any one clearinghouse does things better than another, but we thought it would be helpful to kind of just get a sense of the differences between how the clearinghouses function. So we picked two clearinghouses that we're going to look at. One is NREP, and NREP stands for it's from SAMHSA, and it stands for the National Registry of Evidence-Based Programs and Practices. And it originated in 1997 out of SAMHSA's Center for Substance Abuse Prevention. And at that point, back in 1997, they were rating programs as either model, effective, or promising programs. And then they actually made a change to their designations in 2004. And so there's still information on the practices that they reviewed during that first 7-year period. It's on a separate section of the website. It's called their legacy programs. But they moved forward from that, and they now don't have those designations at all, and actually look at things in a very different way, which I'll describe in a moment. Their current NREP system has 330 practices that have been reviewed on their website, and they are a searchable online database mostly focused on mental health and substance abuse interventions. So there's certainly some crossover with programs that we have on the CEBC, because we've also looked at a lot of programs related to mental health and to substance abuse as they relate to child welfare populations. They independently assess and rate quality of research and readiness for dissemination. And the readiness for dissemination piece is very similar to a process that we do where we look, as I mentioned earlier, to make sure the program has a manual, that it's replicable, that there's training for it. We don't rate that dimension, but we do look for those particular pieces. And then the quality of research, they actually are looking at the quality of the evaluation studies. So the registry does not provide ratings of the intervention's effectiveness. They really are looking at the quality of the studies themselves, and they don't say a program is either effective or not effective or rated on a continuum of how effective it is. They use their quality of research as their main focus of what they're looking at. So for the quality of research, each of the studies is rated on 6 dimensions, and for each of those 6 dimensions, it's rated on a 0 to 4 scale, with the 4 being a higher score and indicating a stronger, more compelling evidence. There's not, as I said, a rating for the overall program. Each outcome is also rated separately because interventions may target multiple outcomes. So the same intervention might target alcohol use and behavior problems in schools, for instance, and so they'll rate each of those separate outcomes. And the evidence supporting those different outcomes may be different for a specific program. And in a couple minutes, I'll go through and actually show you a program, and I think it will illustrate, pretty nicely how NREP does their system. So the 6 dimensions that they look at and they rate on are reliability of measures, validity of measures, intervention fidelity, missing data and attrition, potential confounding variables, and appropriateness of analysis. So those are the main focuses of what NREP does. The next clearinghouse that I wanted to briefly touch on is called Blueprints for Healthy Youth Development. And Blueprints is primarily focused on violence prevention. And although they've looked at more than 1,100 programs and reviewed them, they only put those that are designated as either model or promising programs on the website itself. And so they only have 51 of those programs at this time. And again, they also look at the dissemination readiness, and they look at intervention specificity. Dissemination readiness, again, does the program have the necessary support and information to be successfully implemented? And intervention specificity is basically the intervention focused practice, practical and logical. So does it have kind of a theoretical basis for what it is that you're doing? And then for each of the programs, they look at evaluation quality and they look at intervention impact. And they use that to distinguish between programs being either a model program or a promising program. So for their model programs, the evaluation quality, you must have a minimum of 2 high-quality randomized controlled trials, or you could have 1 high-quality randomized controlled trial plus 1 high-quality quasi-experimental evaluation. And the positive intervention impact must be sustained for a minimum of 12 months after the program intervention ends. To be a promising practice on their website, the evaluation trials must produce reliable and valid findings, and this requires a minimum of 1 high-quality randomized controlled trial or 2 high-quality quasi-experimental evaluations. And the intervention impact, in this case, they don't give a sustained effect, but they say that the preponderance of evidence from the high-quality evaluations must indicate significant positive change in intended outcomes that can be attributed to the program, and there's no evidence of harmful effects. So that's, a very basic understanding of how Blueprints looks at programs. Now again, their focus is on violence prevention, so there is some crossover with the programs on the CEBC, but they have a much kind of smaller niche of the types of programs that they're looking at because of the fact that it's focused solely on violence prevention. So I pulled to try to illustrate kind of the differences in the three clearinghouses, a rating comparison on two programs that are on all three of the clearinghouses. So the first one is multidimensional treatment foster care for adolescents, and the CEBC looked at this program in the topic areas of disruptive behavior treatment, higher levels of placement stabilization programs, behavioral management programs for adolescents and child welfare. And in those various different topic areas, it was rated a 1, is rated a 1 on the CEBC. The last time that we did a re-review on the research for MTFC was in June of 2013. And for NREP, now again, they don't rate the practice itself, they look at the research studies. So they looked at 5 outcomes, and the 5 outcomes they looked at were days in locked settings, substance use, criminal and delinquent activities, homework completion and school attendance, and pregnancy rates. And I'll show you an illustration of how they came up with the overall ratings in those areas. So they took the outcome, for instance, the first one was days in locked settings. They look at the research studies and they rate it on each of the 6 dimensions. So that particular outcome had a rating of a 3 for reliability of measures, a 3 for validity of measures, a 3 for fidelity, a 3.4 for missing data and attrition, a 3 for confounding variables, and a 3.3 for data analysis, and then they average those 6 dimensions and they come up with the overall rating, which was 3.1. And they do the same thing for each of those particular outcomes. They last looked at their research evidence according to the date that's on the NREP website in October of 2009. And then Blueprints rates MTFC as a model program. Blueprints does not indicate when the program was initially reviewed or when it was most recently reviewed. So there's no information available on the website to give you that particular review date. Parent-child interaction therapy was rated a 1 on the CEBC in the areas of disruptive behavior treatment and parent training programs. Again, we last looked at the research in June of 2013. NREP looked at 4 outcomes for PCIT, and you can see the ratings on this slide here. They looked at parent-child interaction, child conduct disorders, parent distress and locus of control, and recurrence of physical abuse as the 4 outcomes that came across the studies. And they last did the research on this in March of 2009, according to the NREP website. And Blueprints rated PCIT as promising. Now, when I went on Blueprints and looked at it to try to determine why it was rated promising, it was not very clear to me why it's only a promising program on Blueprints. It is likely to be their review of the study methods because they spend a lot of time discussing the study quality, but there's nowhere where they kind of provide that summation and they say it's a promising practice because X, Y, and Z. So it is not easily clear to me as a user where that particular rating came from just looking at their website. So that gives you kind of an overview, and there's a couple things that we kind of draw from that. One of the things that's very clear in terms of looking at the 3 different websites is how often they re-review the research. So as I mentioned before, for CEBC, we re-review the research every 2 years. And so we're constantly trying to capture any new research that's come up, and we re-rate programs based on new research that we have found. And we also every year contact every program and ask for them to please let us know if there's any new research on their program that they're aware of. If they submit new research at that point, then we do a full lit review. So anytime a program submits research to us, we also do our own lit review to see if there's any additional research that's been done during that time as well. And at any time, program representatives or any user of the CEBC can submit new research to us. So one of the things that certainly can happen between the different clearinghouses is if we've last looked at the research in 2013, which was true for both of these programs that I pulled up, and NREP last looked at the research in 2009, and we're not sure when Blueprints last looked at the research, there may be differences in how the program is rated on each of their individual rating scales based on which research was available at the time that they last did those reviews. So that's something that's very important to keep in mind. We also have to be very honest that we do have a limitation with our being able to review research, and so there's sometimes a kind of a time lag during the review because our staffing is limited and we have new programs that we're adding as well. So research comes to our attention, and we do try to send programs back through that re-rating process and add that new research, but we aren't able to do it instantaneously just because of other work demands that we have. So we try to do it as quickly as we can. And the other thing that's important, again, we talked about the rating scale and the fact that programs that have utilized our rating scale, organizations that utilize the rating scale, don't always check back to see if changes have been made to the rating scale. We find the same thing with secondary sources in regards to the programs, and that they don't always update information on the programs, and our ratings do occasionally change on programs. So if you see information about how a program was rated on the CEBC and you're not looking at it directly on the CEBC website, it's always a good idea to go back to the CEBC website to verify that nothing has changed in terms of that particular rating, because that secondary source may not have been alerted to the fact that that change has taken place. So I promised when we started off that we would also talk very briefly about some other pieces that we're working on related to this. So looking at the research evidence, looking at the child welfare relevance, those definitely give you some very good information about programs and things to consider when you're making decisions about which programs you might want to select. But there's a lot of other things that need to be considered when you're making determinations about selection of programs as well. And we have been doing some technical assistance work here on the ground in California with a couple of counties in California. And based on what we've learned through that process, we are working on putting together some web-based information on kind of thinking through the implementation process, the selection process for programs. And I'll tell you two kind of kernels of information that we have learned that we think are especially relevant and that we will be adding additional information onto the website about. One is when you go to select a program, you really need to be clear on what the problem is that you're trying to treat and how you've determined that this is the problem. So a good example of this is one of the counties that we worked with. When we went to them and we said, what is it that you would like our help with? What kind of programs are you looking to implement at this point? And they said, well, we've got this really difficult problem right now with very high reentry rates that are happening with our cases. So we really would like a good reunification program to help so that we don't have these reentry rates that are going on. And we said, okay, well, that's a very clearly identified problem that you have, but let's look at what may be the cause behind that problem, because we want to be sure that picking a reunification program is really going to have an impact on the problem that you're seeing. So we went back with them and we looked at what were the trends, what were the reasons that kids had entered into care in the first place, what were the reasons that they were re-entering into care, and what we came to with them was that most of the kids that were re-entering into care were children whose parents had relapsed on substance abuse. And so what they really needed to look at were the substance abuse programs that they were using in their community, and specifically the aftercare for those substance abuse programs, not at a general reunification program, which might provide some assistance, but probably would not have the type of impact on the reason for their reentry rates in the same way that working on finding a new substance abuse program would have. The other piece that we talk a lot about when we work with counties and we work with other entities about choosing programs is you really want to make sure the program fits the population that you're trying to treat. So for instance, if you've got teenagers who are acting out and have very disruptive behaviors, and you want to put a program in place to treat them, then you want to make sure you're choosing a program that really is focused and has impacts and research on its effectiveness with teenagers. So picking a program like parent-child interaction therapy, which is meant for kids aged 2 to 7, would not be the right fit for that particular population. So it's a great program. It's rated a 1. It's got very high if the children that we're trying to treat are between the ages of 2 and 7, but they're, the specific issue that's going on with them is they're having a lot of trauma reactions, then PCIT, again, might not be the right fit because it's really meant to improve parenting skills, not to decrease trauma reactions in kids. So you have to look very closely at what is the population that you're trying to serve and what are the particular outcomes that you want to be able to impact in that particular population. So we'll be adding a lot of additional information and being able to think through these types of issues to the website over the next year. So given that our time is getting short, we're going to move to one last question and answer period and see if there are any questions from the presentation overall and specifically from the last section of the presentation that we had. So it doesn't look like there are any further questions at this time. So with that, we will go ahead and wrap up our presentation. I certainly invite you to come back and visit the CEBC website if you haven't been there recently. As I said, we will be adding additional information on implementation over this next year. We also recently launched our Facebook page, which if you go to the CEBC website, you can like the Facebook page through there. And our hope with that is to be able to provide a venue for people to ask questions and interact with the staff, as well as to share experiences around implementation and the selection process. And so we look forward to utilizing that venue for people to do that as well. If you have any additional questions that you come up with after the presentation, you're always more than welcome to email us at the CEBC@RCHSD website. And we also are happy to answer questions at that point. We'll be happy to post the recording of this so that people can watch it who are not able to be here. And it looks like we did have one question that came in about the Coalition of Evidence-Based Policy and what do we think of their recommendations. And that's a really good question. You know, I didn't look specifically at that website, and I don't really have off the top of my head an answer to that question. But I think what we can do when we post the slides for this, I will add some information on the CEBC website about that particular clearinghouse, because I know that is another resource that people do sometimes go to. So, excellent. Well, thank you very much. We really appreciate your attending, and we look forward to having you join us for future webinars.